Picture waking up to find 300 strangers lined up outside your home, not because of anything you did, but because your own HOA secretly listed your private backyard as the venue for their biggest event of the year. No permission, no warning, just an invitation straight to your gate. This might be your last chance to subscribe to H.O.A. Breakpoints before you miss the next story, because if you think this was crazy, you haven't seen what's coming next. Hit subscribe now before the next homeowner discovers just how far an HOA can go. Rachel Colton bought her 5 acres for one reason: quiet. A gravel driveway winding through oak trees, a pond that caught the sunrise, and just enough distance from her neighbors that she never had to hear another lawn mower again. She'd lived on the edge of the Brookhaven Estates community for 6 years, technically inside the HOA boundary, but on the property everyone called the back 40 the overgrown, half-forgotten corner nobody paid attention to. She paid her dues. She mowed her strip of common frontage. She stayed out of HOA politics entirely. In 6 years, she'd been to exactly one community meeting, and that was only because they were voting on a new mailbox color. She had no idea her home was about to become the most talked-about address in the county. It started on a Tuesday morning with a knock. Then another. Then a car horn. By 9 a.m., Rachel counted 11 vehicles idling at the end of her driveway, and a woman in a sundress was already walking toward her porch holding a printed ticket. "Is this the venue for the Harvest Wine Festival?" the woman asked, smiling like this was the most normal question in the world. Rachel blinked. "The what?" The woman turned her phone around. There it was, the Brookhaven Estates HOA community website. A glossy event page titled Sunset Vineyard Estate Wine and Harvest Festival, complete with a pin drop on an interactive map. The pin sat exactly on Rachel's front gate, her actual GPS coordinates. Her actual driveway, photographed from a drone she never authorized, dressed up with a filter to look like a rustic vineyard. 300 tickets. Sold. At $75 each. Rachel stood frozen in her doorway, watching a line of cars form on the road that led to nowhere but her house, a private residence that, as of that morning, apparently belonged to everyone. She called the HOA management office immediately, expecting a quick fix, an apology, a correction, maybe a mildly embarrassed office assistant. Instead, she got a whole jingle for 6 minutes, followed by a property coordinator who sounded almost bored. "Oh, that map," the woman said. "That's just a placeholder graphic. It's not a real listing." "There are people standing at my gate holding tickets," Rachel said. "I'll flag it for the marketing committee." That was it. No urgency. No apology. Just a vague promise that someone eventually might look into it, while more cars kept turning down her private road, drawn in by an event page that was very much live, very much shareable, and very much still selling tickets to a festival that was supposedly happening at her home in 9 days. Rachel hung up the phone and did something she rarely did. She started taking screenshots. Here's what Rachel didn't know yet: the placeholder graphic wasn't a mistake at all. Weeks earlier, the HOA social committee had walked her property line during a routine drone survey and flagged her land in an internal planning document as the ideal backdrop for this year's flagship fundraiser. Nobody asked her. Nobody even planned to. And the reason why would come out later, when Rachel discovered exactly who on the board had the most to gain from turning her quiet 5 acres into Brookhaven's newest attraction. Over the next few days, Rachel tried everything. Emails to the board, a formal written complaint, a visit to the H.O.A. office, where she was told the marketing committee meets monthly and her concern would be added to next month's agenda 3 weeks after the event. Meanwhile, ticket sales climbed. The festival page now showed a countdown timer. A local radio station mentioned it as this fall's must-attend event, hosted at a stunning private vineyard estate. Rachel's own address had been quietly shared in 3 different Facebook groups. She tried to get the listing taken down herself, but she wasn't an admin on the community site. Only board members had that access, and the one board member who could remove it wasn't returning her calls. By day 6, 280 tickets were sold. Caterers had confirmed. A live band had been booked. And Rachel realized with a sinking feeling that nobody at the HOA had any intention of stopping this before it reached her front gate. 3 days before the event, Rachel found something in the HOA's public financial disclosures that changed everything. A line item showing the festival's venue partnership was tied to an unresolved easement dispute involving her property line. In other words, this wasn't a marketing mistake at all. It may have been a calculated move to establish public use of her land before a vote that could redraw the community boundary altogether. She didn't have proof yet. But she had a hunch, and she had her camera ready for what was about to happen next. Event day arrived with a sky full of string lights strung across trailers, and a line of cars stretching half a mile down the county road. Rachel stood at her gate at 7 in the morning, homemade sign in hand, private property, no event here. It didn't matter. By 9, the first guests arrived dressed in flowing linen, wine glasses already in hand, following GPS directions straight to her coordinates. By 10, there were 50. By noon, the number had climbed past 200, spilling out of their cars onto her lawn, her driveway, even wandering toward her pond for photos. "Is the vineyard tour this way?" one guest asked cheerfully, gesturing toward Rachel's actual front porch. Rachel called the county sheriff's office. She called animal control when someone's dog got loose near her chicken coop. She called the H.O.A. emergency line, which rolled straight to voicemail, the same voicemail that, ironically, still advertised exciting community events all season long. By 1 p.m., the guest count had crossed 300. Cars blocked her driveway so completely that even the deputies who finally arrived had to park a quarter-mile away and walk in. Rachel stood at her own gate, watching strangers wander her property with wine glasses and event lanyards, and she understood, in that moment, exactly how far her HOA was willing to go without her consent. It was almost 2 p.m. when the HOA board president, a man named Gerald Voss, finally showed up, not to apologize, but to ask Rachel to be a good sport and let the event continue since so much had already been invested. "You listed my house as your venue," Rachel said, voice shaking with restraint, "without asking me. And now you want me to just let it happen?" Gerald's tone shifted, defensive. "The board felt your property represented the community well. We assumed you'd be flattered." That single sentence, "we assumed you'd be flattered," was the moment Rachel stopped trying to be reasonable. She pulled out her phone, still recording, and asked Gerald directly about the easement dispute buried in the financial disclosures. His face changed instantly. He stammered something about ongoing conversations and future planning, then quickly excused himself toward the caterer's tent. Rachel had her answer. This was never a mistake. It was a plan, one that treated her land as community property before anyone had the legal right to call it that. That night, once the last car finally pulled away and the caterers packed up trailers full of leftover wine, Rachel didn't sleep. She organized every screenshot, every recorded call, every version of that event page she'd archived using a free web tool the moment she first saw it. The next morning, she hired a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. Within 48 hours, the attorney sent a formal cease and desist to the board, citing unauthorized use of private property, trespassing facilitated by the H.O.A.'s own marketing, and most damaging of all, evidence suggesting the event had been used to establish a public use claim ahead of a boundary vote. The H.O.A.'s insurance company got involved almost immediately. So did 2 other homeowners who realized their properties had been quietly discussed in the same internal planning document. Rachel wasn't just fighting for an apology anymore. She was fighting to make sure this never happened to anyone else on her street. 3 weeks later, the Brookhaven Estates HOA issued a public statement acknowledging an internal miscommunication regarding event marketing, a carefully worded admission that fell short of the full truth, but was enough to trigger a mandatory community vote. Gerald Voss resigned from the board before the vote even happened. The festival's remaining ticket revenue was refunded in full, and the boundary proposal that would have expanded shared community use onto private lots like Rachel's was struck down, 9 votes to 2. Rachel got something else too, a written, legally binding agreement that no H.O.A. affiliated event, marketing material, or drone survey could reference her property without her explicit written consent ever again. Her quiet 5 acres finally went back to being just that. Quiet, but Rachel never forgot how close she came to losing control of her own front gate. If you think this was outrageous, wait until you hear about the homeowner whose fence the H.O.A. tore down while she was on vacation and what she found when she got home. That story is coming to this channel very soon, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. If this video kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure you're subscribed to HO Breakpoints, because the next H.O.A. horror story might be even harder to believe than this one.